Hello and welcome to Face on City TV. My name is Umaru Sandamadu. My guest today is a member of parliament and also a human rights lawyer. And it's important to talk to him as a human rights lawyer because there's an issue of a human right that is currently the national topic being discussed. The marriage of a 63-year-old to a 13-year-old. The clash between culture, religion versus the constitution. That is the subject we are discussing today. You're welcome. Stay tuned in. We have more coming up in a bit. Please stay. The big story this week has to do with the marriage of a 63-year-old priest of the Nungwa Traditional Council, GBORBU WULOMO, to a 13-year-old girl. There's a debate over whether it was a marriage or not. The council says it's not a marriage, it's a betrothal. The ceremony shows otherwise. All state actors are involved. The Member of Parliament for Madina, Francis Xavier-Sosu, is a human rights lawyer. He's been fighting for persons like this particular case. And so we have a conversation with him coming up. Honorable, you're welcome to Face to Face.
Yeah, thank you.
How are you doing?
Well, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
Wow.
We are doing well by the special grace of Almighty Allah. And, we just finished a major Easter event as well. I had a chance to tour almost all conventions within the constituency, been to almost all churches, and then had something to do with our the picnics as well. So it's been a long weekend, but I think by the special grace of God, we are doing well.
You can't rest too, because we have entered the last 10 days of Ramadan, so you have to also start going to the mosque.
Exactly, particularly when we all know that by the hadith, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had his revelations, of the entire Quran within this last 10 days. And these are the days that, prayers, reach Almighty Allah direct. And it's also the time for forgiveness that we pray that we learn to forgive one another and also ask for forgiveness from Almighty Allah. So I pray that it will be a time that Medina constituency will receive all the blessings that Almighty Allah has for his people as they mark this last 10 days of the Amin.
Now let's move from Medina and talk about Nungwa. The constituency is called Kro, but Nungwa has been in the news since the weekend. This issue about a marriage between an adult and a minor. When did you hear about this and what was your initial reaction?
Well, I think I heard it on the social media. I just saw it trending on social media. My initial reaction was that it's not true. Like it can't be true, that it was false. Subsequently, I saw some other major media houses that published the story. Then I became alarmed. When I was touring various churches, the issues were being discussed in different quarters, because what I did over the weekend was to reach out to what I call children's ministries. So when you come to, for example, the biggest Pentecost convention in Medina, I reached out with tons of books to the children's ministry. So we've been talking about children over the weekend, and when this story broke, and I think I was a bit outraged about the situation for several reasons. One of them is that I've been in that space of fighting for victims of either sexual violation, and you would even know that I even have a bill in Parliament on victims of sexual violation. And I've also seen many girls. Actually, I've been a lawyer for many victims of either defilement, children who are young, and one of those cases that left a big scar on my own conscience was a 12-year-old girl who was defiled by two married men, grown men, and this case was before the Cape Coast Circuit Court. And every 2 weeks, I used to travel to Cape Coast until close to 1 year. The lady became due and delivered, and she delivered when she was 13 years old.
Wow.
And it was a very pathetic scene. I recall that I had to work with the social welfare to get the baby adopted, and then we tried to see whether we can rehabilitate the 13-year-old girl who is now like a mother. But Umaru, I say with a big disappointment that all my biggest try and all the people have not yielded anything. The girl was completely destroyed, and she's never been able to turn around that situation.
So there was justice, but there was no justice.
No, because anything that has to do with children has a far-reaching effect, because the child is a child, and we're talking about once they don't get the foundation right, it follows them till the time they grow, and sometimes they are destroyed forever. Mm-hmm. And that is why over the weekend when I was hearing these issues, I was extremely outraged. I'm like, this is not happening. It's not going to happen. It was wrong, and there was really something that needed to be done about it. Mm. So it was quite refreshing to read from the police that the mother and the child were in their custody, and that they were a bit okay.
The issue is when we talk about marriage, marriage is an agreement between two families and two persons. So there's consensual a decision that let's get married. Looking at the pictures and the videos, and just on the face of it, the girl didn't look like she was protesting. Her family or parents who may or may not have been there didn't look like they were protesting. And yet you use the word defile. Explain to us for our education when you have to use the word defile, whether or not there's consent.
Well, anytime it has to do with a child.
Where a child is defined as what?
A child is defined by the Article 28 of the Constitution as someone who is 18 years old.
Below?
Yeah, below 18 years. So if you are below 18 years, then you are a child.
So the same thing as a minor?
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, the consensual period for sex is 16. So, I mean, if you are 16 above, it won't amount to a defilement. But once a child, so the marriage age is 18, but the sex age is 16. Mm-hmm. And so when you have a carnal knowledge of a child below 16, then it becomes defilement. And at that stage, consent is, of no consequence, because once a child is not 16 and above, 17 and above, she will be deemed to have no ability or capacity to even give,
So what that means is that this 13-year-old girl, whether or not she is born in a royal family or in a traditional family, and whether from her babyhood and childhood she has been trained to prepare her for this, and whether or not she accepted and said, I am going to get married to this man, is inconsequential. That's what you're saying.
Absolutely inconsequential. And there's a policy reason for that. Mm-hmm. We are talking about a nation of about 34 million people, with large population being children, right? And so you don't want to endorse or positively encourage any conduct that suggests that any other person out there could have things to do with children with respect to any form of arrangement that you may want to call it. And I think that is where there is a real conflict between our own traditions, our religion, and sometimes what the law says. It is not all things that we do traditionally, that are allowed traditionally, that are legal. It's not all things that you may even do religiously that may be legal. And so every individual, and both traditional leaders and traditional actors, will have to watch those spaces very clearly. At what point do we have an intersection between the rituals, the traditions, the culture, and our religion or the law? Once you're able to decipher these things very well, I'm sure that you would be fine. I don't believe that these arrangements are unique to the Nungwa area. I'm sure this may be some form of arrangement that goes on
in
many parts of the country, and we may never get to know of some.
I've actually encountered one, and it happened in my own village at Australia Junction, and I recall having to invite social welfare and the police to move in, and that girl was prevented from being married at age 13. Now, religiously and traditionally, my community members believed it was the right thing to do. Now, my point of intervention they thought was haram and wrongful. What happened in Nungwa, there were adults who took part in this ceremony.
Yeah.
It's a cultural thing. Perhaps it's been happening all the time. This is the first time we are seeing it on social media, or because of Facebook Live we've seen it. Can you explain why our constitution acknowledges customary law? And if you look at Article 7, it mentions that. And yet you're saying that what happened is wrong. So at what point does the constitution's acceptance of customary law fail?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. Now, when you take the constitution itself, the constitution prescribes a limit of acceptable behavior and confers powers on parliament to enact laws, sometimes to give details to those acceptable behavior or the limit of those behavior. When you go to Article 11 of the 1992 Constitution, which we call the laws of Ghana or the sources of laws of Ghana, this is what it reads for the purpose of our view. It says that the laws of Ghana shall comprise this constitution. So the constitution itself and everything embodied in the constitution is the law of Ghana. And then enactment made by or under the authority of parliament established by this constitution. So the laws that parliament pass are part of the laws of Ghana. And then it says C, any orders, rules, and regulations made by any persons or authority under a power conferred by this constitution. So if the constitution confers power on you to make laws, if you do those laws, it's recognized. For example, EI, Electoral Commission, they can put EIs and all that. And then it says the existing law. This is just saving the laws that existed before the constitution came into being. Then E says the common law. Now, Article 11.2 says that the common law of Ghana shall comprise the rules of law generally known as common law, which are like the judge-made laws that we all know of. The rules generally known as the doctrines of equity and the rules of customary law, including those determined by Superior Court of Judicature. So anytime a custom comes under scrutiny and a Superior Court makes a pronouncement on those cultures or practices, it can become part of our customary law. And for the avoidance of that, and that's what the Constitution actually provides in Article 11.3, it says that for the purposes of this article, customary law means the rules of law which by custom are applicable to particular communities in Ghana.
Okay, so this particular law or rule is
applicable to Nungwa. It may be applicable to even part of Volta region. It may be applicable to part of Ashanti region. That's why we call Ashanti customary law. We have the Gan customary law. We have the Ewe customary law. And so practices, that's why if you look at even our inheritance system, you look at our marriage system, our dowry system.
Goes through customary
it's
law.
all your custom determines what kind of even list you are given. However, what we must understand is that whilst the Constitution prescribes and admits all these laws, the Constitution itself says that any other law which is inconsistent with the Constitution shall be null and void. So if you have a custom, a practice, a ritual that is inconsistent with this Constitution, that ritual, that custom will be null and void. And for the avoidance of that, the Constitution even makes it very clear in Article 26 of the Constitution. And for the purposes of our viewers, we will read for the education. In fact, Article 26 of the Constitution says cultural rights and practices. That is a theme. Cultural rights and practices. And it says, 26.1 says that every person is entitled to enjoy, practice, profess, maintain, and promote any culture. Gan culture, Ewe culture, Akan culture. Everyone has a right to promote those cultures. And it says that traditions or religions subject to the provisions of the Constitution.
So there's a restraint.
There's a restraint. So enjoy your culture. Enjoy the tradition. And this education is so important so that people I've seen many people have provided justification. right? If your justification is that it's cultural, it's actually not marriage. It's actually a traditional thing. It may have a semblance of a marriage, but it's not marriage. Then if it is not marriage, why make it look like a marriage?
So that's what the Gadangbe Council said. And Ayukwe Otu, who is a former Attorney General, writes that statement and says, based on the conversations they've had with GBORBU WULOMO, what happened was betrothal. I don't know what our law says about betrothal.
That's where the challenge is. See, once you use the betrothal, you are still delving into a challenge, because when you read the provision I just gave to you, which is Article 26(1), Article 26(2) says that all customary practices which dehumanizes or are injurious to the physical and mental well-being of a person are prohibited.
Does this automatically then prohibit betrothal?
It prohibits betrothal through the Children's Act. When you read Section 14 of the Children's Act, it is so clear. Section 14 of the Children's Act. Maybe for the purposes of viewers again, I would like to read so that we all get the necessary education.
All right. So this is Face to Face on City TV. My name is Umaru Sandamad. My guest is Honorable Francis Xavier-Sosu. We are talking about what has happened in Nungwa, where there's a marriage that's happened, which marriage is now being described as betrothal. And we are looking at what the law says about that and how to marry the law and the culture. Have you found the provision?
I do. Yeah. I have, actually. So Section 14 of the Children's Act, Children's Act 1998, Act 560, it says right to refuse betrothal and marriage. And Section 14 says that no person shall force a child, A, to be betrothed, B, to be the subject of a dowry transaction, or C, to be married.
So no forced marriage, no forced betrothal. The gray area now is whether we don't know as to whether there was a forced...
If you are not 18, you cannot give consent for any of these things.
So it's considered forced. So whether or... So in fact, your consent is not even important anymore.
Absolutely.
The moment betrothal comes in and you are below 18, the law says it's wrong.
Absolutely.
I see. So you are inviting the law enforcement agencies to move in under this law, obviously. Well, we've seen that the police said they have given protection to the mother and the girl. We don't know what the circumstances are. We don't know whether they've gone to the house to pluck them out. We don't have the details, whether they are keeping them in a safe facility and all of that. But is a police intervention what you are asking for?
Well, I think that the purpose of that intervention, to all intents and purposes, is the protection of this little girl. And I say this because every life in Ghana matter. And it gets to a point where we may have to put off all the whatever interests and considerations you may have for the sake of protection of the collective conscience and morality of Ghana. So if we see an act which is wrong and the major stakeholders and actors are not acting, then critical voices need to speak. And it's the reason why I raised those concerns. And that's why I said I'm happy to note that since last night, when I first even raised the consent around 10 p.m., by 2 a.m. or something, at 12 a.m., I saw a tweet by the police that says that the mother and the child are safe. We are happy to know that they are safe. That's the most important thing, because when you are dealing with children, we call something the welfare principle. The overriding principle for dealing with a child is a welfare principle. I think one thing that has been violated badly in this circumstance is how this 12-year-old has been paraded, on TV, on social media, everywhere. And there's no better way to say it than to say this is wrong, it's condemnable, and it shouldn't repeat itself. And any attempt to want to water it down would amount to a reintroduction of the Trokoshi system, which Ghana took a decision on to abolish with Act 554 way back in 1998. And so I'm happy to know that work is being done and that's it. Once the matters are addressed as have been raised, we are okay.
But if a law is not popular with the people for whom the law is made, then it's a weak law, isn't it? So that if the people who are supposed to benefit from this law say they don't like the law in the form it is, they are happy to practice their ways, why are you imposing a law on them that they don't like?
You know, that is the essence of leadership. You see, anytime we talk about leadership, the leader is the one who has the courage to take people to where they ought to be, even when they don't want to be there.
But are you smarter and wiser than the people?
No. When God created leaders, there's a reason why we have leaders, and the reason why we have followers. It is not for nothing that God gives leaders. It doesn't mean the leaders are wiser, but a leader must have a vision of where he or she wants to see their society and rally people towards that direction. And so, if there is a social ill which is fighting against the generality of women, particularly vulnerable women in the country, and you see that, you should be able to do something about it. And that's why I worry about Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection. Because what you just talked about, they must be at the forefront of educating people about the ills, the social ills that goes on with respect to these children and what happens. And if we don't do that, we'll be destroying our society. If you like, you go to part of some ghettos. I mean, because we are members of parliament, we go around a lot. You go to some ghettos and you go to some places and you see how people's life are wasting away. I mean, I don't know whether we worry about it as a society, but we will one day not have Ghana if the very people who must be the future of Ghana are not protected under circumstances like this.
Okay. We do know that everybody is under the law, but this is a chief priest of a traditional area. Do you just move in and arrest him? There's going to be resistance, and if there's resistance, the people will not support you. How do you deal with matters like that?
Well, I think that, I mean, there are several ways these matters are dealt with, and I won't be an advisor to the Ghana Police Service in respect to how they deal with issues like this.
They are your friends.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, for once, we are cooperating
Yes.
on some very important issues. And so I know they will be the best people to study what security situations are. I mean, they have a situation where they don't necessarily, sometimes arrests have all kinds of forms. I mean, they may take statement from him without necessarily going to physically want to arrest or something, particularly when we are hearing different sides that says that the things are not exactly how they look. And so the police, their goal is to make sure that they unravel what exactly it is. If the police come to the conclusion that, look, there is actually there's no intention for a child marriage, and so there's no need for any prosecution, what it means is that we settle the mind of every Ghanaian that, well, what happened was a wrong reportage, and it's not the case that the girl has actually been married.
What if they say that, listen, there's a marriage or there's a cultural practice that has gone on, but I'm not going to consummate this marriage until she's of age, say she's 16 or 17. Would that pass?
And I think that, I mean, with the law that we've discussed,
because we heard that there could be marriages like that, and the girl would be with a man, or may not even be with the family until
the honest truth is that no marriage is a marriage without consummation, right? If you don't consume a marriage, you don't consummate, you don't cohabit.
Okay.
It doesn't become a marriage under even our laws, right? What we are looking at is a situation that has a potential of putting children in danger. And that's what we are addressing.
This is Face to Face on City TV. My guest is the Honorable Francis Xavier-Sosu. He's MP for Madina, and we are talking about his neighboring constituency, Kroa, because there's something that's happened there, a marriage or an engagement, or I don't know the right term to use, betrothal, which is what the person behind the story has used, that they betrothed a 13-year-old girl to him, and because they needed a virgin, and they could not get any virgin in that enclave, they had to settle on a young girl who was the only virgin they could find in Nungua and surrounding communities. That is one of the various information that are coming through. When we come back, there are other bills that the Honorable Francis Xavier-Sosu has been pushing, at least 17 that he has pushed through since the gates were opened by Honorable former Speaker of the House for members of parliament to bring private members' bills. We'll talk about some of the things he's brought in there, because he's been generally fighting for rights of persons. One of them, persons accused of witchcraft. We'll talk about the status of that. And of course, other bills that are in the House which have generated lots of controversy. Please stay with us. You're welcome back. This Face to Face on City TV. My guest, Honorable Francis Xavier-Sosu. Honorable, at the last count, you had about 17 bills that you've taken to Parliament in your private capacity, what they call the private members bill, which means that you've thought about them and you think that the state will not be interested in pushing them through the Attorney General as a bill in Parliament. So you've decided to go through that. Just quickly summarize for us some of the key ones that you raised, and let's talk about the one that is becoming an issue now.
Yeah, I think there's a number of them. One of them has to do with the compensation for people who are wrongfully arrested and then detained.
Explain that. So I know that there's something called malicious prosecution.
Yes.
That you want it to become a civil...
Well, no. Actually, you know, we have like penalty units for people who are convicted of offenses, but we don't have compensation units for people who are exonerated.
Even if you have been trialed properly.
So, for example, it was as a result of Erica Santi versus Attorney General case that I did,
yes,
where he was exonerated at the Supreme Court,
yes,
after he has already served 15 years in hard labor.
In prison.
And then we wanted compensation for him, and it became a problem because we don't have any law that regulates how such compensations regime should be dealt with. So that's one of those ones that we're dealing with. And then, of course, the opening up of legal education and reconstitution of the legal council, the General Legal Council, is one of those bills that I earlier also submitted to the Parliament of Ghana. We have those that border on health, generally, amendment of the NHIS health to add mental health conditions to the NHIS, and then also amend the NHIS to add victims of sexual violations.
When you talk about that particular one, on the
mental health,
the expansion of NHIS, that's a cost to the national purse. Is that not one of the considerations before your bill is submitted?
Not really, because it's what you contribute. That it is when you are a valid contributor. We are only adding the condition.
So it's an insurance.
It's an insurance condition that so we are adding you to the condition. Currently, they are not added.
Okay.
And so mental health, because mental health is a very fundamental challenge that we should be able to add.
So far as you contribute and you are not well, you should
be able to. Not only that, also children with cancer and tumor.
Okay.
You know, because when you go around, you see the practice of kids being held on the streets and people begging, advertised. You know, and so I think as a moral society, we shouldn't allow people holding kids on the roadside begging for money. And I think it's also speak to, you know, some level of poverty. Because no rich person will allow you to be holding their babies outside begging for alms for their treatment. So the essence of that bill is to introduce a regime of child welfare when it comes to Medicare. So that any form of illness that kids have, so long as they have a valid NHIS, they should be considered under the NHIS.
Okay. Let's talk about the witchcraft or the allegation of witchcraft bill. Give us a background to that.
Well, the witchcraft bill began somewhere.
What's the proper title? What's the name?
It's Criminal Amendment Act.
Okay, so it's
Criminal Amendment Act to introduce a regime to criminalize witchcraft accusation.
Okay.
Now the whole advocacy began somewhere in 2019 when Equia Denta, the 92-year-old lady, was lynched on account of witchcraft accusation. And in fact, apart from Equia Denta, we've had several stories of women either being beaten, being dehumanized because they are alleged to be witches.
Sent to witch camps.
Witch camps. In fact, you see, the whole thing, the witch camps developed as a result of the witchcraft accusation. In fact, the camps originally were developed to receive people who were being pursued because they are alleged for protection.
Asylum.
For asylum. But, you know, traditionally, even though it's for protection, the camp eventually became a place of abuse.
Stigma.
Sexual abuse, slavery, because sometimes you need to pay money before you get a place to sleep, and so on and so forth. And so in order to deal with this situation, when the Equia Denta case broke, the then majority leader, Honorable Soichi Mensah-Bonsu and Honorable Haruna Idrisu were the people who began the process in the 7th Parliament, but could not finish the process before the 7th Parliament dissolved. But because there were issues that I had followed up on a number of occasions, once I got to the House, I decided to follow it up, met with some colleagues who were interested, Dr. Gisao, Honorable Ntosu, Honorable Crosby, Honorable Ayamga, all of them who were interested in the issue. So we came together to lead this prime members bill. I recall when we traveled to the north, particularly if you go to the Gani, Patinga, Gambaga, you go to those camps and you see the condition in which women are living. It's unbelievable. And for me, what breaks my heart was with the story of one woman who said she was also referred to the camp by a pastor.
Wow.
So that was how I realized that no, this problem is a bigger problem than we thought. Yeah. And when you listen to the women individually, sometimes someone has a second woman or married a second wife and who claims that she receives or she gets or she experiences maybe constant headache or something and attributes it to the first wife. And just that attribution could be a reason why you would now be accused and then you are sent home. But anytime people are accused of being witches, it deprives them of their home, it deprives them of their livelihood, and sometimes it deprives them of their property. And the worst is when it deprives them of their lives. And that was why it was a very serious issue that we were following. And if you check the periodic review of Ghana at the international level, anytime Ghana goes for international periodic review, it comes up that what is Ghana doing with witch camps and dealing with those situations. And so it was a great news that last year in July we were able to have this bill passed into law to achieve, I think, 4 things. One was to criminalize the accusation of another person of being a witch or labeling the person that the person is a witch. And then the second one had to do with determining So that it prohibits witch doctors, people who say they have the power to determine that you are a witch
and
and attempt to exorcise.
So those ones
in the process, prohibition
you won't prohibit their trade.
So we prohibit the trade in witch doctor trade. It's also prohibited. And then the third one had to do with community leaders who use their space, either it's a palace or either a church or wherever, a space that you use to promote such witchcraft accusation. And then the last one is compensation for persons who suffer some kind of violence on account of witchcraft accusation. And this compensation was supposed to be paid by the one who accuses them of being witches, as a way of deterring people from actually accusing others.
Not the state.
Of being a witch. No. But then the state had an obligation. But it was an obligation imposed on the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection. That says that within some period, they will take steps to reintegrate these women. And if you go to the witch camps, reintegration for some of these women means that they live in the same place. All you need is a policy direction that says that we've disbanded the issue of witchcraft and people are not going to be accused of witches again. And so this is the entire law that we put together.
When you took it to Parliament, did you get you got unanimous decision in the House?
Absolutely. In fact, even on like the death penalty, which at the committee level was passed on majority decision, because we had to vote, and at the committee level for the witchcraft accusation, it was unanimous at the committee level, and when it came to the floor too, it was unanimous.
So it has become, so it's a bill,
it's a law
waiting to become an act. Then the second bill also is
that is the Armed Forces Amendment, because the Armed Forces Amendment also replaces some 9 offenses in the Ghana Armed Forces Act with life sentence. Now those until the amendment, they carry death penalty. So they've all been replaced with life sentences. And so we are hoping that if the president were able to sign them.
So your death penalty is not for a murderer who is convicted and sentenced to death.
Okay, so let's take it this way. So the death penalty bills were 2. One of them was amendment of the Criminal Offences Act. That borders on murder, attempted murder, treason, and murder, attempted murder.
High treason.
Treason is not part of that one. It's I think piracy, and smuggling in gold, and I think one other. And so those offenses, 5 of them,
which carried the death penalty,
were also repealed and then substituted for life sentence. That has a presidential assent.
That one, the president signed on that.
Yes.
So currently in Ghana, if you engage in any of those crimes, the judge had the liberty to impose a death penalty on you. Now he cannot.
Yes, and that was the reason why in Major Mahama issue, even though they were convicted for murder, all the 12 of them were given life sentences.
Life sentence,
because of the amendment.
So that one has been signed?
It had been signed by the president. It was signed on the 2nd of August.
Which one has not been signed?
It's the Armed Forces Amendment. The one for the Armed Forces Amendment.
So these 2 bills are what you have succeeded in getting through Parliament, which has been sent to the president. Yes. What is the status now? The law is that
I think that the status is that the president had actually indicated to Parliament that he wanted those bills to be introduced in his name. In fact, the legal argument made by the president before the Parliament of Ghana, honestly speaking, are not tenable. With all due respect to the president, I believe that the president was misled on those matters, and hopefully the president still has an opportunity between now and the end of the year to still do something about them. Is the reason why on the issue of the witchcraft accusation bill, for example, which I believe is so critical to the protection of women in Ghana, I have filed some 5 different petitions. I've petitioned the UN Human Rights Commission. I've petitioned the AU Commission. I've petitioned the ECOWAS. I've also petitioned the Council of State, SHRAJ, and hoping that the president will take some swift action on these matters. I'm hoping that all these international bodies will bring some form of persuasion on the presidency to go forward to assent to this bill.
The reason the president did not sign, you said, is because he wanted it to come in his name. Explain that.
That's why. Well, that's why. If the president wrote to Parliament and said that he's not against the bill in principle, and that he would rather the bill be introduced in his name.
What that means that there will be cost involved.
Well, not necessarily. You see, not necessarily, because for example, like the Armed Forces Act, like this. Armed Forces Act is over 60 years. It's never been used before. So even in law or in jurisprudence, we say these laws are falling to the statute. So they have no relevance on our statute books. So we are only regularizing the law. And so there has no cost component at all.
So what's wrong with bringing it in the name of the president then?
Well, I have no objection. In fact, the purpose of all these private members' bills that you see me leading in Parliament is not necessarily to be like, have a bill in your name. No. There's a social problem, and I think that it must be addressed. And I'm playing some lead role because I believe that I was voted here. One of the reasons I've been voted is to champion legislations that will help my community and help everybody. When these legislations pass, it will help everybody, including the people in Medina. Okay. And so once the legislation is introduced, if the president is interested, you can always take over the legislation. It doesn't matter. So all this piece of legislation, like extension of maternity leave for women, introduction of paternity leave, 5% employment of persons with disabilities, 2 Islamic holidays, a number of all these things that you are pushing, they are major social, I will call it inclusive social policies, that if government says that, oh, well, we want to reintroduce those bills, I'm not going to say no. So at the end of the day, it's a solution that I'm looking for.
There are many people from your party who have predicted that the president was refusing to sign this witchcraft bill into law because he was preparing for the future, and that you have simply become a victim of circumstance, and that the anti-gay bill, which he knew was going to go through Parliament, he was going to refuse to sign, and so he had to then prepare the minds of everybody. Do you think that it's connected?
Well, I think what the president has done rather seems to be confirming those assertions, right? Because I overheard the reasons why he was not assenting to the anti-gay bill using the same Article 108 as a reason. But Article 108, with all due respect, does not apply. In fact, the Article 108 cannot be the reasons why the president will not want to assent to the bill. Because the Article 108...
To which of the bills?
To the LGBTQ plus bill. Okay. Because he said that he was just using it as a reason. In fact, now to all the bills.
Yeah.
Basically, because now that's why he's trying to use.
So 108 says what?
108 for the purposes and of our listeners. It says that Parliament shall not, unless the bill is introduced or the motion is introduced by or on behalf of the president, A, proceed upon a bill, including an amendment to a bill that, in the opinion of the person presiding, makes provisions for any of the following.
So this is where the speaker was invited to make a determination, and the speaker made a determination that there was nothing wrong.
Exactly.
Let it go
So when
through.
the bill first comes to the speaker, the one presiding, Article 108 applies only to the speaker and the one presiding in Parliament. It has nothing to do with executive power. And even that one, it goes on further to say that the bill it must be a positive imposition. So it has nothing to do with the implementation of the bill.
Okay.
If the bill contains provision that is seeking to charge, because for example, it says that proceed upon a bill, that makes provision for the following: A, imposition of taxation or alteration of taxation otherwise than a reduction. So it's the reason why when I brought a law to reduce taxes on sanitary pads,
it's allowed.
It's allowed.
But if it's an increase,
if I were to increase, then it's not allowed. Okay. That's why I said we should abolish all those taxes on sanitary pads. Okay. So you see that when we amended, the proposal I brought for the sanitary pad was to do it zero rated. So it's allowed. It's just creatively going around the law to push the agenda that matters. And so all this, when you read the bill, it says that the imposition of a charge on the consolidated fund
is not allowed.
You see, that is, the law must impose, the provisions of the law you are bringing must positively impose a charge.
So now there appears to be a standoff between the executive and the legislature, and the judiciary appears to be in the middle there somewhere on this anti-LGBTQ bill. People are even seeing it as a fight between Bagbin and Nana Akufo-Addo. You are a member of parliament. This is a bill that has been approved by the generality of the House. How do you think this quagmire can be dealt with?
Well, it's a very difficult one, if you ask me. But I think when there is a fight between executive and legislature, the judiciary is always the place to be. And so I understand that my colleague, Dafia Mekpo, has sent aspects of the president's action to court, challenging his action. I know that I think there are other matters before the Supreme Court in respect of the same matter. We are only hoping that the Supreme Court will provide some clarity on these matters to see how we proceed, because it can't continue this way.
Yeah.
When a bill has gone through all the rudiments of Parliament and finally passed into law, for the president to simply veto, I don't think that's an acceptable practice.
It's a few days to Eid al-Fitr. In fact, next week will be Eid al-Fitr. You give us an idea that you're going to give us 2 holidays. Is that holiday coming? Are we going to get an extra holiday as Muslims?
Well, in fact, I believe in those 2 extra Islamic holidays. Thankfully, His Excellency, former President John Dramani Mahama, has weighed into this, because it's been one of his visions, and me also running on the ticket of NDC in Parliament, only pushing this vision for him. I am hopeful that we get this bill passed soon. Unfortunately, it won't be this year. What will happen is that unless maybe we have to convene the speakership to quickly reconvene and do those certificates of urgency, but that does not even apply to private members.
Okay.
And so it's a bill that is in the making. In fact, we have an upcoming council of Malumes and Ulames stakeholder engagement on the bill, and the whole idea is to continue to fine-tune the policy and then the reasoning behind the bill. Hopefully, if we don't even succeed in this 8th Parliament, I'm very sure that the 9th Parliament, through the leadership of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, will surely make sure that these bills are passed and you have 2 extra holidays for the Islamic community.
It's good you've used the leadership of His Excellency the President, which means you're anticipating that he would win. That's going to be my next conversation when we come back after this break. NPP wants to break the 8th. John Mahama wants to come back. Xavier-Sosu is NDC member of Parliament, hoping that the NDC would come back. Can they really? I'll talk to him about his own constituency, how he has fared, and then nationally how the NDC is doing ahead of election 2024. Please stay. You're welcome back. This face-to-face on City TV. Let's conclude now by doing some politicking. Madina constituency, you're doing all these things in Parliament, all the pampa. If they don't vote for you again, you cannot proceed with anything you are proceeding with. How is the ground looking for you?
I think by the special grace of God and Almighty Allah, the grounds are looking good. But I'm not complacent. We're doing everything we can to make sure that what I'm doing in Parliament, Madina understands its impact and its effect on Madina. And so we've been going around educating and engaging people on the work I do. I've always said that the work of a member of Parliament can be summarized into three folds. The first one is legislation, which is the core thing that we do. The second one has to do with oversight over the executive. And then the third one, providing some form of support, whether it's physical or social development within your catchment area. And I think that we have represented that interest well within Madina constituency, because when I came to office, there were 4 major projects I began in Madina here. And looking at those projects 3 years down the line, or 3.5 years down the line, I think they have achieved to a very large extent the purpose for which I set them. One of them was the Madina Job Center. Now, the Job Center is an online portal that we use to do job connections. We mobilize people for training, and we put people in direct trading who are learning. And this year, I think by August, we are graduating our first set of people who have gone through particularly different trades, hairdressing, sewing. And Umaru, I can tell you, as we speak today, the impact level of the job center is over 7,000 people who have benefited. When we were doing the door-to-door recently, a woman walked to me and said the daughter had a job through the job center. And after working there for 1 year, she had the opportunity in the the workplace, and she's now in UK. Okay. And was so excited. The Madina Job Center CEO last year was nominated for the Washington Mandela Fellowship, using the Madina Job Center as a model of job connection for young people. And so the job center has done so well. I can imagine a Madina Job Center in a 24-hour economy when His Excellency John Dramani Mahama is in charge. It means that there will be many more things that we'll be able to do with the Madina Job Center. That is for the job center, and it's still working. Now, we have educational program that I have, out of which you have educational scholarships. And also several people have gone through the educational scholarship. And at least, if nothing at all, 3 I know who benefited are also abroad right now, you know. And the very latest one is in the University of Pristina in Kosovo, in Europe. And so the education is also working out so well. When you came here, you saw me signing some document. They are all education fees and other things that must support children. Then apart from that one, I began what we call the Water for All project in the schools, because when I realized that apart from sanitary pad, which is a big hygiene issue in the basic schools, our schools do not have potable water. And we have 54 basic schools. And if you don't have potable water, it will be a problem. So to someone, you say a borehole is nothing. But if you have a mechanized borehole to over 2,000, 3,000 children, means a lot. And so that's why I brought the Water for All project, where we're providing mechanized borehole for schools. As we speak now, we have 12 of those mechanized boreholes across the schools. We've just had a partnership with Direct Aid, who is providing additional 20 of those mechanized boreholes to ensure that every school in the Madina constituency with a population of over 34,000 would have this benefit of this mechanized borehole in our schools. And then the other thing we've done is, providing books for our libraries. And last year, across the schools, all basic schools, public schools in Madina and private schools, we donated over 23,000 boxes of books worth over 1.4 million Ghana cedis. And this we also got through partnership that I got. And every school can testify to that. And so these are some of the things that we've been pushing on the educational front. And the last thing on education is the Best Teacher Award, where the overall best teacher in Madina picks a car. The second edition is also happening in August this year, where the overall best teacher is picking a car. So in terms of education, a lot is also being invested there. Then we have health. We have health projects. Every quarter we do medical outreach. Our health project is one of the most progressive health projects that we have. In fact, our health project is even now having contract to do health outreaches for other constituencies, from my office. And so it's also one of the major things that we're doing with health. Last year, health equipment alone that we shared in the consortium was over 1 million Ghana cedis. Also with partners. And then I have the Islam Project, which is a special outreach to the Islamic community. You know, Umar, you have also a Zongo boy. We are all Zongo boys. And you know how Makaranta emerges. Sometimes it's not any formal structure. And so one of the things I'm doing with the Islam Project is what we call the Makaranta Harmonization Project, where we are harmonizing the curriculum of all Makarantas. And then we have a common curriculum, and annually we are doing Quranic recital competitions, and children who excel and both in Arabic are given special support and so on and so forth. Before our Eid outreaches and our and so it's a number of things happening even at the constituency level.
But you're currently an orphan, and when I say orphan, it means your party is not in power. You're hoping that next year your party will be in power when you become an MP, and yet you have an Alhaji Baumia threatening your candidate's chances.
Well, I think that the Alhaji Baumia would fail in the upcoming election for very obvious reasons. He has, in the last 7 years, failed the people of Ghana. I mean, his legacy has been lies. He has been a leader without principles. He has been a leader who has not stood for anything. And so for me, such a person cannot be trusted.
He has stood against e-levy, and now he says he will scrap it when he becomes president.
That's my point. When you stand there and e-levy is passed, you were there, part of the economic management team.
What could he have done?
Well, we should have heard his voice. We should have heard his advice. So he should give us the evidence of what he said to the cabinet when e-levy was going to be passed.
You can't go to cabinet, disagree, and come out and...
You see, that's my point. You see, so in Ghana, we love the politics more than solving problems for people. You see, you were there to look at the tax on Momo and all these issues that we've been talking about. He openly say I'm against, and it's been done, and you see, you are... And you say that when the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose you. At least come and say, I'm sorry for saying that, and say that maybe I got my policy or my theories wrong. Then you just say that, oh, even though it was good then, now it is the same, but it is worth knowledge that something that me, myself, even all academics are even confused about. So people are even so worried now, and we don't know whether Alhaji Baumia is still even an economist. You know, so I think that he won't be a match for His Excellency. When you look at, you see, the reason why many people are validating His Excellency John Dramani Mahama now is that he's always stood for the principles he believed in. He's always been consistent in terms of nation building. You look at how much, borrowing that happened under John Mahama and the kind of infrastructure that we saw in this country. And see today where our external debt is over 600 billion. And yes, we have nothing to show for. Look at Medina constituency. You see, all these monies are those that government must invest in physical infrastructure, including roads. You award the Danfa Ayi-Mensah road, and you award 11 million Ghana cedis road since 2019. And you claim that because of rains, the contractor could not work on those lanes. I led demonstration.
They arrested you again.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm not leading demonstration again on that road. But my point is that I led demonstration. I was harassed with police and everything. One would have thought that we would have done something about it. Till date, nothing has been done. Almost all the road infrastructure in Medina are all intact. And I believe that the only solution to some of the physical infrastructure in Medina will be His Excellency John Dramani Mahama.
Very well. That's Honorable Francis Xavier-Sosu. He is NDC MP from Medina, speaking to us here on Face to Face. My name is Umar Sandawando. Keep watching City TV. It's your world.